Hi, everybody. It's Sharon Spurlock from the St. Louis Arc Family Support Department, and I'm really happy to have you join us today to learn a little bit about one of our funding partners, the Productive Living Board, and our guest, Amy Meyer.
So my name, as Sharon said, is Amy Meyer, and I am one of two agency and community relations specialists that works at Productive Living Board, or PLB, here in St. Louis County. So my job is to support the agencies, answer questions, support them with completing documentation that we need, our funding cycle that occurs every year, as well as go out and see the services in action and meet some of the folks who access those services within St. Louis County. We also take phone calls from family members, community members, or individuals who are, either receiving services or in seek of services to meet whatever goals and aspirations they have for themselves. So that's kind of a little bit about me. I've worked for PLB this time. This is my second round with the organization. So I worked there for a little over 4 years the first time, and then have come back on board as of October of 2019, and have been there ever since. I did.
One thing that I think was such a gift to our community, and a lot of people don't realize it, is that right before everything went down with the pandemic, our Senate Bill 40 boards had spent a lot of time working together to create a more unified service that made a huge difference for agencies in terms of our ability to quickly respond to customer needs and really be able to take care of things. Can you briefly talk about the ERA?
Sure, absolutely. So as Sharon said, for several years, four of the SB 40 boards in our region worked together to create the Eastern Region Alliance, or ERA. And so that the members of that are PLB in St. Louis County, DDR in St. Louis City, DDRB in St. Charles County, and then DDA in Jefferson County. And so, really, the purpose or the thought process behind that is to reduce the administrative burden on our partner agencies in terms of completing all of, as I mentioned earlier, the documentation that we require, as well as applying or submitting their funding requests on an annual basis to receive dollars or funding from each of the county boards. So agencies may receive funding from one of us or from all four of us, or a combination thereof. The other thought process was to make it seamless when families or individuals move from county to county, so that their services, look as close to similar as possible. And there's not a lot of transition that goes on within them.
So we have our first question, and
Oh, great.
it really kind of, you talked about the mission of the Productive Living Board, but can you tell in a little bit more detail how you get your money and how you make decisions on disbursement? Where does
Yeah,
that money
absolutely.
come from?
Absolutely. In 1979, the county taxpayers voted to put in a tax through, so we collect our dollars through St. Louis County personal property taxes. We serve over 4,000 people a year on average, and that's through 40 partner agencies, and a little over 100, between 100 and 110 services are funded through those county tax dollars. And so they are dispersed to those agencies. The way that we determine funding is based on needs. So PLB traditionally has done needs assessments throughout the county. We also have open lines of communication with our partner agencies in terms of, varying things that they're seeing or hearing from the folks who are receiving services. This past fiscal year, we brought on four new partner agencies to provide and expand the services that are offered in St. Louis County. And that was, again, based on agency communication, as well as feedback from our community.
Yeah, so I always tell families when they call us, this is your tax dollars at work. If you get your
Absolutely.
personal property tax, there's a little line item there, and part of that money goes to support people with developmental disabilities. That money in St. Louis County goes to the Productive Living Board, and then they do a really good job of listening to community need and dispersing those funds. There's a question that says, do you see an influx of people moving to Missouri from adjacent states that don't have this funding source? Are the county tax boards unique to Missouri? I know not every county in Missouri has one.
Correct. Not every county in Missouri has one. As far as I know, I can only speak from my personal knowledge. Yes, we are one of the only states in the country that is set up in this fashion. The PLB is a little bit different too, and I apologize for not mentioning this earlier, in the sense that we do not provide targeted case management. We partner with the Department of Mental Health or regional office to provide targeted case management in St. Louis County. All of our ERA partners do provide targeted case management in their respective county, but we work with DMH to provide that service at this time. You're
Um,
welcome.
because you are a publicly funded entity, your board meetings are open. And I'm wondering if you could talk about what a family might experience if they came to a PLB board meeting.
Sure, absolutely. So as Sharon mentioned, our board meetings are available to the public to attend. We have virtual and in-person opportunities. So our virtual opportunities are similar to what you all are experiencing right now in a webinar format. Our agendas and minutes are also posted. You can find those on our website, which we'll take a look at a little bit later. Um, but typically, they read through their agenda. So there's a board agenda that is sent to them with supporting document that they're able to read through. Many of our board members ask really great questions of our staff or our partner agencies who are in attendance. Again, they may be in attendance virtually or in person. And so it's really an open discussion a majority of the time between our board members, the PLB staff, typically our leadership staff, as well as our partner agencies. And they're discussing, agency requests or maybe different types of funding that's become available. For example, in the recent past, we've instituted a natural disaster and emergency fund that was based on the community, having the flooding that we did in the recent past. All of our funding is accessed through our partner agencies. So families or individuals would go through their agency provider to access those types of funding.
I want to go back though to that identification of priorities. In the 3 years that you've been back, 4 years you've been back at the PLB, what do you see as the priorities for funding right now?
So right now, our focus is on technology. Thank you, COVID. We recently added some additional adaptive equipment or assistive technology providers, St. Louis Arc being one of them, Variety Center, and then UCP Heartland or United Cerebral Palsy Heartland. We found, and through the pandemic, that there were some folks who maybe had not utilized technology to meet all of their needs, but we've found that through that, technology can be used, whether it's an electronic calendar, reminders, alarms, those types of things. So we did put out an RFP and acquire those additional partners to provide support in that realm. Transportation is a big thing, mostly to get to and from various employment training sites or employment sites. And so we have a reimbursement that is designed to be short-term for folks who maybe, have gotten their first job. And so they don't have dollars in the bank or set aside to provide, cover the cost of transportation. And so we do have that reimbursement service available to families. The other thing, like we said, was the natural disaster emergency preparedness dollars in response to the recent flooding that came about. Just different things like that have come forward through the natural progression of our community and kind of coming out of on the other side, like what does life look like now that we're living with COVID, as opposed to being secluded in our homes.
And just for those of you out there, just because Amy's identified those areas, there's still a whole lot of things that they've been funding for years that continue to be a priority. So again, on the website, you can see all the different individual services that are funded. Why don't we pull it up and look and just take a
Sure.
quick peek at your website? Amy, as far as the Productive Living Board, what do you need for like proof of residency? Once they have an address in St. Louis County, does that meet the need?
Yeah, so once they've established a mailing address within St. Louis County, they would then identify what provider or what agency they would like to receive services through. And then that agency would pick up the process in terms of collecting all of the demographic information, eligibility documentation, and things of that nature to ensure that that person is able to access PLB funded services.
One more question before we dive into the website.
Sure.
We're talking about, you mentioned about the ERA, that part of the benefit was to make it be not so complicated when families move from the city to the county to St. Charles. So if
Correct.
families are moving, what's the best process they're asking to continue their services? And I would say that certainly notifying the provider is important because, for example, with our respite program, we have some families that move back and forth across the city county line fairly often. And we're fortunate enough to have funding in both counties, but we have to be accountable to each of our funding sources about where people live. So notifying us as to where you live is going to be the first step in making sure that that's being done.
Absolutely. That would be the first step that you would want to do because also um, sometimes while we are aligned in terms of the services that we provide, there are certain services that are unique to certain counties. And so I would also encourage you to, when you reach out to your provider, to make sure or ask when you're sharing with them where you're planning to move or where the individual, your loved one is planning to move so that you can assure that that service is available in that county or a like service is available in that county, if that makes sense.
You bet. We don't have to be the ones providing your service, but if it's important to you, you want to make sure you can still get it.
Absolutely. So this is our PLB website. And so you can go out on whatever search feature, search function you have at your home or on your smartphone or on a tablet. And it's plboard.org. And so this really is going to give you the information all about us and what we do. And so specifically talking about funded services, you would come to our website up here in this white ribbon. You'll notice I clicked on funded services. It's going to underline the ribbon or the section of the website that you're wanting to go in. It's going to highlight for you services by age. So we, as you'll see, kind of our little tagline on our homepage is that we provide services that empower individuals across a lifetime. And so our services are categorized by age, so school age, transition age, retirement age, so on and so forth. And so you'll notice that the little bubble or circle gets a little bigger when you hover over it. So you can search by that. So by age, you can also search by category. These categories are going to remain consistent across all 4 counties within the ERA. And so whether you're looking for community integration, community living, employment support, family support, you'll be able to choose which bucket you're looking for. We'll go ahead for the purpose of today and look in our support systems, gives you a definition of what that is. So we'll click on support systems. This is where you'll find all of the organizations or partners that PLB has and funds within this category. So we fund advocacy, childcare, education support, family-based supports, family support, and then in-home support within this category. And so each agency is listed here within this website section. So if you were going to look for education support, you can see here, these are the organizations that provide educational support for folks, facility-based supports or respite outside of the home, and then family support. And you'll notice, like, for example, St. Louis Arc here, within family support falls many of the services that they offer. So assistive technology and adaptive equipment, their camp services, community employment, education, employment training, so on and so forth. And so you would just scroll down through. If we wanted to go to ARC's website, we could click on their logo and it's going to take us to ARC's website directly from the PLB site. The thought process is that it can be easily navigated. You can easily link to other websites or partner websites outside of this site. So that way there's ease of transition between the two. You don't have to go out and open up another window and do a separate search for yourself.
And if I wanted to find out about when the next board meeting was, is that under get information or?
So get information has news and events, meeting minutes and information. So you would click here. It's going to tell you when all of our board meetings are. And so you can click on view under notice, and that will bring you to this document, which tells you the agenda here and tells you kind of which committee. So our board has committees within them, within it rather. And so it tells you where that is, gives you the link to the webinar on Zoom if you choose to attend virtually. If you do want to attend in person, it's at our Productive Living Board office, which is at 121 Hunter Avenue, just outside of Clayton. And so that gives you the address here. You can also email Becky Hirschbach, who is our executive director, with any questions. If you have a comment from the public that you would like to be acknowledged at the board meeting, and there's the date for which it was due by. You'll also notice there is a minutes column. So if we wanted to go back and read the minutes from the June board meeting, you would simply click on here and the minutes will populate. And then if there was any presentations, we do from time to time have our agency partners who come in and share presentations with us. So that can be in the form of PowerPoints and things of that nature. So we will share those with our public as well. It also has our committee notices and minutes, and then any presentations that maybe take place at that as well.
So I know that one of the reasons I hoped you would come in to talk today would be to share some of the big successes that have occurred despite some of the challenges we've had over the last few years. And while we're in the webpage, maybe you can talk a little bit about IDD Help and the transition that is currently being made to new resource.
Sure, absolutely. So IDD Help was a pilot project that took place over the course of 3 years. It was a partnership between United Way, PLB, DDR in St. Louis City, and DDRB in St. Charles County. We started funding that service in 2018 prior to my coming back. That began. And the service recently ended last spring. The line is still open and operable, and myself, my peers, Jennifer and Kim, are still taking questions or comments or calls from that line. However, there is no longer an IDD Help community coordinator answering those calls. So you will talk with myself, Jennifer, or Kim at PLB. Part of the thought process behind the end of that pilot project was we began funding Family Navigation. Family Navigation is an interim and supplemental service to targeted case management. So the thought process behind Family Navigation is that it's a short-term intensive service to help an individual or a family reach a goal, whether it be obtaining funding through Department of Mental Health through one of their waivers, whether it's finding affordable housing, whether it's applying for Medicaid or Social Security. They also can provide information and referral, which is just typically one phone call, maybe 2 phone calls, but they can come out and meet with you at your home, in the community, at a agreed upon location, and they may meet with you over the course of 4 to 5 times, depending on what the seriousness or significance of your need is. but they also provide advocacy. They can work alongside and with your case manager if you have one. They can support you if your child has an IEP through that process, as and linking you with services that you may or may not be aware of in your immediate community so that you can achieve whatever goal you have for yourself or your loved one. And so that was one of the reasons is that when that service came to be, we found that families and individuals really oftentimes preferred that face-to-face or hand over hand assistance in filling out all of those things, which was something that IDD Help um, did not provide. And so also one of the things that we have talked about at PLB, my first my first go around with them, and then we talked about it a little bit more. We were still talking about it rather when I returned, was really creating kind of a one-stop shop for individuals and families to go to, whether that be a document that we handed out, mapping tools, or how do we really get information into one collective spot? And so we were lucky enough to be connected with Madeline Webster, who used to be a St. Louis ARC teammate, and she introduced us to Google Sites. And so myself and the family navigators really came together to create the IDD Gateway Resource Guide. Before I kind of go a little bit further into this, I do want to share that this is still in progress. So we've shared it with our partner agencies as well as some of our community agencies to get feedback from their perspective, make sure that everything is in the right categories, that it's in the right spot, that all of the links are working accurately before we share it with you all and those who are receiving services. So it's coming, it's just not 100% at the finish line yet. But I did just want to share it briefly with you all today. So this is the IDD Gateway Resource Guide. Again, the thought process was develop a one-stop shop where families and individuals who are seeking services or seeking additional information regarding various topics, whether it be governmental agencies that can provide support and funding, or local agencies that can provide support and funding, mental health services, housing services, educational services. So one stop, one place for you to go and find it. So on our home page gives you a little bit of a definition. This is a tool that PLB owns and operates. So myself and one of the family navigators rather have access to make changes, edits, and things as they come up. Provides you a definition of what family navigation is, and then our 4 family navigation partners are listed right here on the home screen. Gives you information on what each of those family navigation services within those agencies look like. They all do kind of have their own little specialization. So I do encourage you to read them and learn about them. They oftentimes too collaborate and work with one another to ensure that families and individuals are receiving the appropriate supports and receiving services that truly do meet their needs. And so again, these are linkable out to the respective website. So if we clicked on St. Louis ARC, it's going to take you directly to St. Louis ARC's family navigation information. They're organized by funding systems, funded services, and then other resources that families or individuals may need. We got this information based upon the data that came in through the IDD Help service. And so they're organized in that manner. So governmental agencies, you have Department of Mental Health, Vocational Rehabilitation, Health and Senior Services, Medicaid and Medicare, Social Security, and then supplemental nutrition. So that talks about like EBT cards and things of that nature. So I'll just show you really quickly what these pages kind of look like. So this just explains SSI and SSDI. So sometimes individuals may have questions on what the difference is. So this explains it here. Again, if you have questions, it links you directly to Social Security's website. This is how you file for a child, how you file for an adult, what the eligibility requirements are, if there's anything there's a checklist that you can follow, so it links you directly to that. How you would complete an application, so you can click here, it's going to take you directly to that application online. There's a video here that kind of is very simple and goes through the process. We have a link out to a table for comparison of SSI and SSDI. This is the question that often came up through the IDD help conversation. So this is that table. This is updated on an annual basis. We really tried to make this site evergreen so that we didn't have to make a lot of changes on an annual basis. So that's why, again, why it's linked out to a lot of our websites.
I just want to interrupt really briefly. We had a pre-submitted question about how can I apply for disability without a lawyer? As you can see, a lot of these websites are really designed to do it yourself. And so those opportunities are always there. If it's complicated and you want some support, go back to Family Navigation, tell them you'd like a little assistance with the paperwork, and any one of our 4 agencies can assist you with that.
Absolutely. So it also has our regional resources. So the 4 SB 40 boards that collaborate to create the ERA are on here. So St. Louis County. So this is What is Productive Living Board. You can click here to go to our website that we just saw moments ago. Click here to browse by age range, or click here to browse by funded agencies and services. You will also notice that on the bottom of each page, if you need further assistance or have questions about the topics or the information that's on that page, it's going to throw you back to that front page, that home screen, and really suggest that you reach out to one of those family navigators. I do have a flyer that we recently created that also breaks down each of the family navigation partners as well as the services that they provide. I can share that with Sharon, who will then have it and be able to share with you should you feel that you need that or that would be helpful. Under funded services, you'll notice that the same language that's utilized on PLB's website is utilized on the IDD Gateway Resource Guide. When the 4 SB 40 boards were working together to come up with common language to utilize, they found rather, because as Sharon mentioned earlier, I came in at the tail end of all of that really hard work. But they found that this was very commonly used language and definitions of various services that was widely understood by providers and families and individuals alike. So that language is utilized throughout this site. And so if we look at support systems here, you'll see those same definitions that we saw on PLB's website. And these buttons or blue bars link you to each respective ERA county to their websites that specifically link back to services funded under support systems. And so each section under funded service is set up in the same format. Other resources is another area. This is kind of everybody else, if so to speak. You will notice when you're looking through these, when this does go live here in the next several months, that many of these agencies or organizations that are mentioned in these other resource categories are funded partners of one of or all 4 of the ERA members. And so if we look at crisis support, for example, we do have a section under here for mental health. Our dollars were specifically approved through our tax that was passed by the county taxpayers to fund folks with developmental disabilities. And so while we don't fund mental health services per se, or folks who have a diagnosis of a mental health diagnosis or have mental health support needs, we do still want these services to be known and be available to individuals, especially now as we've heard, a lot of folks are needing these services. And so much like the other services or the other logos within the site, this will link us to Mercy's website here, their Highland Behavioral Health Center, to get more information. These are also our county partners who do fund mental health services in St. Charles, the city, and St. Louis County Children's Services Fund. And so again, these will link you to their respective websites. If there's any type of food need, we have the food bank here, sexual assault hotline, human trafficking, and then again, that needs assistance. Educational support links you to the various school districts within all the counties that have educational support for folks with developmental disabilities. So here in St. Louis County, it would again give you a little description of special school district and then link you directly to their website. St. Louis City Public Schools, St. Charles Schools, Jefferson County Schools, and then other educational resources. So these are set up really determined by what the category is, but they all somewhat look the same. I will just also point out here, because I know that these are on here, there are some of our partner agencies who have flyers for various services. And so these flyers are on here. You'll notice that when I came here, they have this bar that you can scroll up and down, but you can also undock them from the website. Then you could download this, save it to your phone, to your tablet, to your computer. An agency could download this and email it to you, or you could also print it off and save it on your desktop. It's really hopefully helpful and very user friendly. So that's the IDD Gateway Resource Guide. That's one of our biggest successes, I would say, for me personally, as a member of the PLB team over the last several months, is getting this up and ready.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a game changer. And I've been around long enough to remember the giant handbooks that we'd update every couple of years. And by the time it came back from the printer, it was already out of date. And it was so cumbersome to tell a family to go to page 136 to look for something. And this is just going to be really, really nice. So for those of you that are excited by this, you'll be able to get your hands on it shortly. We'll be pushing that out to you. But in the meantime, this is a tool that our navigation team is using directly with families. So yes, that's the question. I just checking, you sure can get a navigator to help. So even being able to see it visually there, sometimes it's nice to have somebody else who's more familiar with the service and more familiar with the resource guide. So the nice thing about navigation in the time of Zoom is that we can do it this way. We can open our screens and share with you a specific resource and help walk through it. Or you can open it and share your screen, but we can still be there to navigate and support you. I don't know if you have time. One more question.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's that question about Department of Mental Health funding and SB 40 board funding. What are the times when I can, or how do I know if I can access PLB funding if I have a waiver service?
More often than not, individuals who have access to a Medicaid waiver are not going to be eligible for PLB dollars. The thought process behind that is that our dollars are utilized for people who do not have access to funding for any service. There are folks who, maybe your neighbor or, someone that your neighbor knows has a waiver and is also receiving, I know respite is one of those services that folks have. More than likely, or more often than not, again, those folks are going to have been grandfathered into that type of situation. If somebody has a waiver and their case manager and the partner agent or the agency that they're receiving services through can document that that service is not a waiverable service, there are certain situations where that service may be able to be provided to that person. It's really on an individualized basis. So I really encourage you to work with your case manager as well as the agency that's providing services to work through that process. And certainly the agencies yourself, you can always call and we can always talk through those specific situations should they and when they arise.
So if I've got a waiver, talk to my case manager. See if there's a service that's available in the waiver that would meet the same need. And if they don't have a provider, or if they don't have the service at all, then at that point, they can maybe come back and talk to you guys directly about whether that might be something that could be funded. Or
Absolutely.
come to your provider agency and we'll help
Yep.
navigate that. Thanks again for coming, and thank you, Amy.
Thank
Bye,
you so much for
everybody.
having me. Have a great rest of your week.